Today we're talking about abortion. I don't want to talk about abortion. Of course I don't want to talk about abortion. It's disappointing that we have to talk about abortion. Can I get something just out of the way? This is not about Republican Democrats. It's not what this is about. There are moral issues that bleed over and they become politicized. That doesn't mean that we don't talk about them. Do you know that paying your taxes is not a political issue? Do you know that Paul told you to pay your taxes, for example? That becomes a moral issue. So I just want to get that out of the way. It's totally inappropriate for me to use the time just to air my political thoughts. Do I have political thoughts? You know I have political thoughts. Here's another thing. This is not appropriate or the time for me just to become irritated on a topic and then just use this to have 25 minutes just to really come down on abortion. Am I frustrated by abortion? Yeah. Do I get really frustrated about this? Yeah. Jordan has to hear this more. I'm going to check that this morning. I'm also human like you're human. My number one thing that frustrates me is child abuse. So yeah. I'm going to try to do my best to be objective with this and go to God's Word. Because here's the thing. I do like to talk about moral issues, especially whenever it affects your life. You know, our country is looking at Roe versus Wade. Will that be overturned and will it go back to the states? And every state will figure out, will this be legal or illegal? And so I'm talking about this because it could be that you've already had this discussion, or you may have this discussion with a loved one or a friend, and we want to know, hey, what does God say about this? And also a reminder of how do I handle myself in these discussions, which is equally important. So the value of life, and we're going to talk about abortion. I like to begin at the beginning whenever God is creating all things. We read in Genesis 1:26 and 27, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. When we're talking about mankind and man being made in his image, that includes both male and female. That makes up mankind. A man or a woman, a boy or girl are made in the image of God. I just don't want to take anything for granted. Can we walk through this for a moment? After God floods the earth and he realizes, I'm not going to do this again in this fashion, and he has some instruction, we also have this passage. This is in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. It's very interesting how the Bible uses blood. Blood is a representation of life. You do not have blood, you do not live. Life is in the blood. Very important element. You're going to see this in the sacrificial system, so on and so forth. Let me add one more passage to this. Jesus, whenever he's comforting his audience, his disciples, not to be anxious of these things in the world. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. God will take care of these things. Don't worry about that. Jesus has a statement where he said, look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? I'm putting passages together, albeit I hope in context, and I hope that I honor these things that Sean learns from this study. All life is valuable. All life has value. But we see within God's creation that there was something that was specifically made in his image, and the only thing that was made in his image was mankind, both male and female. And the shedding of that blood, the taking the life of that, is very important to God, and one who does so, their life is required. Because that individual was made in the image of God. Okay? Fair enough? Whenever we're having this discussion of abortion and any topic, I think it is, you cannot overstate this. You have to listen to the person that you're talking to. Because you really need to understand what is it that they're saying and what is it they believe. Just like you want someone to listen to you and not take your beliefs or what you're saying out of context. We do not like to be misrepresented. And if our goal is actually to get somewhere, then that has to be the case, because we're also going to be more successful with the discussion that we're having. In other words, if there's any hope, we have to have those things in play. And the reason why I want to bring this up is this. Be careful, because there can be assumptions. You could be talking to someone, when you're talking about abortion, they're thinking about, they don't like you using the word child because they sincerely do not believe it's a child. Listen, you may not like that, but you need to hear it. Do you see what I'm saying? You need to hear that. A lot of people, as you begin to discuss this topic, you'll learn that. And if you talk to them, hey, what do you think that there is a cutoff line whenever maybe abortion should not happen? You know, you'll hear people say that, well, not whenever they get, like if they could feel something that I wouldn't feel comfortable. Well, that's at least getting us somewhere. Do you know that's happening in about 15 weeks with a child? See, this is valuable discussion. Oh, I didn't know that. You know, you have these discussions. Someone would say maybe a heartbeat. Well, that happens at like 6, 8 weeks. You see what I'm saying? And so sometimes you need to make sure that you understand what you're talking about. And the reason why I say that is because, listen, there are some people that are very militant and they are okay with abortions even right after birth. But what you'll find is actually most people aren't comfortable with that. Most people actually, the more they know, they're not comfortable with abortion after about the first trimester. Well, you need to know that, because you just don't even care that it's a child, and no, they don't even look at it as a child. There's a lot of things they didn't know. But it is true that some people go, that's an absolutely child, and I don't care, and I believe that we have the right to take its life. So what's happened is that the debate has come down to, when does life begin? Okay? And so what we've done is we've turned to science, and we've turned to biology. I'm not against, I need to say something. I'm not against science. I'm not. And in this case, science favors you. Biology confirms that life begins at conception. That's been agreed upon at this point. The DNA and everything is there. And so from a scientific point of view, once conception has occurred, you're at the earliest form of human life. And so now it just progresses. And that's all well and good. But brethren, I got to tell you, I just appreciate people that don't feel like they have to make all their argumentation based on science. I understand why we get into, we'll say things like, well, you don't find it to be valuable. At one point in our history, we didn't find black people to be valuable, and we thought it was okay. And so we enslaved them when we treated them unjustly. And we go, and it's kind of one of those gotcha deal, because, you're talking about the consistency. I'm not saying it's a bad argumentation, but what I'm saying is it's leaving God out of the picture. If you persuade someone to agree with you, but you left God out of the picture, I've got to ask this question: did we get anywhere? Well, on one hand, you're like, well, yeah, because we're not taking the life, and it's hard to disagree with you. But on the other hand, if we continue as a people that leave God out of the picture, where are we really, see what I'm saying? Where are we going with this? So it's a tricky one. In Hosea chapter 9, the context here is God is getting on to his people. Ephraim is a representation of the people. And God's going to take his glory away from them, and there's going to be nothing left. He says, Ephraim's glory shall fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, no conception. In the book of Ruth, we read, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Let me say another thing. Sean, do you think the Bible is a science book? No, I don't think the Bible is a science book. I don't think that's the point of the Bible. The reason why I don't have a problem with science in the Bible is because they have two different goals. Science is there to prove things, and they can lay it out in front of you. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, brother, and that's why it's always changing. We're always learning things. The Bible, that's not its goal. Matter of fact, if anything, God will say, I'll put things in front of you that don't make any sense scientifically, and I want to know what you're going to do with that. The Bible there is to point out a sin problem, a relationship problem, and it's there to talk about reconciliation. It's not meant to be a science book. So that has not gone over my head. But to say, though, at the same time, that it doesn't talk about things that we don't need to take note of is going too far also. So, for example, the Bible confirms that it understands the idea of conception and pregnancy and birth. God was behind the conception. Do you see? Between Boaz and Ruth. It was a process. It wasn't meant for a scientist to come out or a biologist to come out and be like, oh, listen, it's just saying something that is confirmed. Look at a few other passages. In Job chapter 10, verse 11, and I so much appreciate Dusty's class on that. It has reminded us to be super careful with the context, and I felt comfortable using this. Some of this is Job erring, okay? But listen to this. You clothed me with skin and flesh, knit me together with bones. Did not he who made me in the womb make him? Is talking about a servant in that passage. And did not one fashion us in the womb? I'm just talking about a big picture here. I'm not trying to get all technical with you. Just hear it. Get the point. Solomon, Ecclesiastes 11:5. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. And that's beautiful. Now, that's a beautiful passage about the power of God, but you also see the complexity. There's a thing going on God's end that you don't know. You know, questions that we have that we don't know. How does all that work? And hey, can I tell you something? It's okay. You don't need to know that. You don't need to know that. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Who created Jeremiah? God did. Who formed him in the womb? God did. How did all that happen? I don't know. I just know that God did it. I know that God's behind conception. I know he's there during pregnancy, and I know he's creating something. Here's a powerful one. Psalm 139. For you, David, for you formed me in my... And it's poetry. It's beautiful. But listen to it. This is what David believed, and he was led by the Holy Spirit. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. This is interesting. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. We're hearing this slogan, and this is one of the more kind slogans, because some of them are very depraved. My choice, my body. No, it's not your choice, because it's not your body. It's God's. And he gave it to you. And that body within your body is his body. And he's working and he's creating. Brethren, where is Sean at with this? Here's my belief. I believe that God is working in the womb, and I should not interrupt his work. I guess if I had to articulate it to you. And so I see it as life, and I believe that we should not take it. That's my understanding. I also see that Israel understood the value of life while in the womb of a woman. So this is Exodus 21, verses 22 through 25. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out. And it is interesting because sometimes in other nations around them, they would use the term fetus is being used. In your Bible, it's a different term, and it's talking about a child. Though I'll share something with you in just a moment. But there is no harm. The one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, in other words, the child that was in the womb, if there's harm to the child, is what they're saying. But if there's harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So an Israelite under the Mosaic law believed it to be a child, and if you harmed a woman who was pregnant and you caused the life of that child, your life was required. Now that was God's people. You know what's really interesting? So we had the Mosaic law around the 1500 BCE. There's what's called the Code of the Hammurabi. This is a earlier, what would be called Old Babylon. Okay, Old Babylon. And this is going into the 18th century BCE, is whenever they're dating this code. Do you know even that society, that it was in their law? He has like 273 laws, this king of Babylon, of Old Babylon. And they specifically hit things like marriage and divorce. By the way, we're going to talk about divorce next week. And they hit things about miscarriage. And in that society, if you hurt a woman and caused a miscarriage, you were fined for that. You want to hear something even more intense? And this is going to be a little graphic. I'm trying to be careful with this. But the Middle Assyrian law, which was written about 200 to 400 years after that, so now we're going into the 13th to 15th century BCE. If a woman caused her own miscarriage, they would run her through with a stake, and they would put her out for the whole community to see and would deny her burial. We're out of touch. We talk about those who are wanting to preserve life are barbaric. Let me tell you something that's barbaric. The Assyrians, who weren't exactly known for being nice guys, the Assyrians, if they would have heard a woman today or a man today say, well, if you do this, it's going to force us to do a coat hanger abortion and possibly kill the mother, they would say, don't worry, because we would have killed you anyways. And we would have run you through, and we would have displayed you and denied you burial, because that's barbaric. We're losing a little perspective on this. This is not normal. Now, I'm saying this not because I'm getting a kick out of this, but we need to feel the gravity of this. We say things, abortion, we use clinical terms. We don't want to see pictures of this. We don't want to talk about what's going on, because then we're going to have to face what we're actually talking about. We feel like because we're in the 21st century and we're wearing suits and ties and we're educated and we're progressive and we've got Ivy Leagues that we're better. We're not. We've failed in this area. Brethren, and this is probably low on the numbers, in 2019 the CDC reports, and they don't report everything. They're not taking into account states, for example. So you don't have to legally report abortions. And there are states that are known for their high abortion rate that are not reporting all their abortions. But in 2019, we took the life of basically 629,000 children. It's not good. The land of the free, not for them. So this is not good. And this is a mark on our integrity of a country. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. But yet some people don't see children that way. Sometimes it's how they've been raised. Sometimes it's due to ignorance. I was thinking about the principle between 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Whenever Paul wrote to those in Corinth, the natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. I put this in here because I'm thinking, Sean Briggs, in my life, I've got to be wise on who I'm talking to and how I talk to people. Because the thing is that sometimes you're dealing with someone and you abhor how they believe or what they believe, but you may find out that they're just spiritually discerned. They don't know any better. They don't know any better. And realizing that doesn't mean that you're approving of what they're doing or that it makes you feel good, but you need to know your audience, because it'll change with how you're dealing with them. They may not genuinely see things how you're seeing them. They're spiritually discerned. And these things that you're saying for the moment seem like folly. Be patient. And it's hard because of the topic, but be patient about this. But then, yeah, there are some people that are just straight up evil. and you kind of have to know who you're talking to. And it may change the sharpness at a point in your discussion. Paul, when he talks about the downfall of mankind, gives one description. These are people that do not honor God, do not seek to honor or give thanks to him. 3 times God lets them go. You remember that text? It's a very, very terrifying way. One of the ways in which God punishes a people, God just says, I'm just going to let you do you, and I'm going to let you reap what you sow. And it's not good. Well, at the end of that, Paul wrote, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Sometimes you're going to see, maybe you're online or YouTube and you're seeing these young college students. I'm not picking on college students, I get it. Especially given your home, if you weren't taught, if you weren't helped, you get into a think tank. And here you are, and you are parroting what everyone else is saying. By the way, I'll be reasonable with you. It's easy to talk about abortion and my concern about it whenever I'm talking to people who agree with me. It's a little bit more difficult whenever you're surrounded by people who don't agree with you and they think that you're evil and you're unkind. It is easier to do. All of us can do that, okay? So sometimes you're talking with someone, they don't know any better. Man, be patient. Be patient. But sometimes you are talking to people who are militant. In other words, say, I know it's a child. I'm not making this stuff up. I've heard way too many of this stuff now. This is the kind of stuff that personally gets me heated at home. I got to watch it. Be wise. Be wise. You got to know your limits. Be wise. Some people have no problem telling you, I know it's a child. What if they were just delivered, late-term abortion, after birth? It's her body at that point. The child still needs her. She has a decision. You kill that child? Yep. And they celebrate. Do you know some of them celebrate abortions? You don't think I'm telling you the truth, do you? Evil. 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 That's not the majority of people. Evil. And they're encouraging other people to do it. Why are they doing that? Sometimes it's not. They're evil. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to the people of Israel, any one of the people of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel who gives any of his children to Molech shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And if the people of the land do at all close their eyes to that man when he gives one of his children to Molech. In other words, I just want to pretend. You ever met someone like that in your life? They close their eyes, they just pretend like it's not happening. God's saying, you're closing your eyes, you're acting like they're not doing this. You see this is going on. You see one of your own giving their child to Molech, and you do this? And do not put him to death, then I will set my face against that man and against his clan, and will cut them off from among their people, him and all who follow him and whoring after Molech. What I'm saying is that we need to know who we're talking to, because not everyone's the same. Some people are off and they need help. Some people, it may end up being a sharp rebuke. It may get to that point, and I also think we can become too sensitive. It is not wrong at a certain point to say you're killing someone and this is wrong. Parents back then would give their children up because they believed that the God was going to be angry with them and punish them physically if they did not appease him. I'm afraid that we're doing the same thing today, just in a different form. One of the red herrings on this discussion is molestation and rape. That's horrible, but that's not what the majority, by any means, of why we're doing this. We're having people that are promiscuous and irresponsible and end up finding themselves in a situation and they just want it to go away. This is difficult, isn't it? That's why I don't like to talk about this, but here we are. However, you also, and I believe in this, you have some people that are overwhelmed and they're like, I get it. Here I am, and I take responsibility. But now I'm thinking about my child's future, and I don't want them to be poor. I don't want them to be put in a foster system. You've heard this. I'm genuinely scared, and you think it's easy for me to tell you that I don't think I can care for them, but I don't want them to suffer. Like what? Look what could happen to them. Well, listen, whenever Job had everything taken away from him, he's like, I actually know that feeling. I know that feeling. Job says, why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb and expire? Why did the knees receive me? Or why the breast that I should nurse? For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept. Then I would have been at rest with kings and counselors of the earth who rebuilt ruins for themselves, or with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden stillborn as a stillborn child, as infants who never see the light? There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. There the prisoners are at ease together. They hear not the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slave is free from his master. You know what I mean? He was just at that point, he was in the pit. And he was airing it out. I mean, he was venting. It's like, I just wish I wasn't born so I wouldn't have known this turmoil that I'm in. And hey, can you not sympathize with that? I just think you're being dishonest if you can't understand why a person would say that. You know, even us, if you're being honest, you'll hear about these horrific deaths where children are killed. And what's one of the things we'll say? Well, because you're trying to find some positive in it. Well, or at least they'll be with the Lord. Or maybe they won't know some of the evil of this world. But the reality is, but should they have been killed? No. So what I'm saying is, like, let's remember who we are and how we handle these things. Let's have some heart. And let's ask this question. Instead of just saying, don't do it. And by the way, I'm not saying that in every situation, if you don't have a solution, you can't say that's wrong. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying, it is good, though, to have a solution. Okay, so then what? That's good. So then what? Well, let's start here. Let's acknowledge that it's life. Okay? Let's start from there. But let's take some responsibility. Hebrews 13:4, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. You know, I was listening to one of these debates recently, and this guy was trying to plea with this man of the world, and he said, and this guy, well, what solution do you have to bring to the table? And he said, I think that we don't need to be a promiscuous nation. I think we need to honor sex and not have sex until we're in a committed married relationship. The guy said, well, that's just Elijah goes, we're not going to do that. Well, so that's really when we're getting to the heart of the matter, is that God has solutions and he has help. We just don't want to hear what they are. First thing I would say is that we need to honor the marriage bed. But let's say you haven't honored the marriage bed. And here you are, and your girlfriend's with child. Brothers, can I remind you of something? Proverbs 23:22. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. You may not, I'm going somewhere where you may not expect this. You know, we talk about, well, the men have a right too. See? It's the men who gave them life. That's right. It's the men who gave them life, so be there. You decide to act irresponsibly, and you're with child, that is your child. Be there to raise him or her. Don't put that on her. Support her and step up to the plate. Ownership. I'm not trying to skip to that. Let me say this again. The first line of defense, honor the marriage bed. Titus 2:4. This is to the older women, to be reverent, sober-minded. Okay, remember, mamas, we talked about this recently. So train the young women to love their husbands and children. A woman, and I get it to an extent. I don't want to hear what a man has to say. They don't understand me. Okay, I'll give that for a moment. Then mamas, will you step up? Mamas, will you step up? Will you help us? Don't make the guys fight this fight. Let's hear from you. And you got to help these young women. Things like, you know what, it's going to be okay. We're going to come together. We're going to teach you how to love this child. We're going to teach you how to rethink these things. And let me tell you, I do believe there are situations of rape and incest. And these poor women that are going through that, our hearts need to go out to them. They need love and support and kindness. You know, I don't think anyone here disagrees with that. Boy, James 1:26 and 27. If anyone thinks he is religious and cannot bridle his tongue but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Appreciate your patience. This is the last passage I have for us. You know, we've I'm not getting onto us. We've debated this topic a lot because in the church we ended up having a split decades ago. One of the issues regarding the Lord's money, well, you know, who should do this? And you have that camp of brethren that say, well, I think that the church is supposed to do that. The church needs to help widows and orphans. And then the other side, and this is my understanding of this passage, is the context is talking about individuals. This isn't a church action. This is what you do as an individual. You think you're religious. You need to keep yourself undefiled. You can't bridle your tongue. This isn't a collective act. But I got to tell you, you get so much into the weeds on that, you strip the power of the verse. God's saying, what I'm saying is, why don't you help someone? Well, like who? Let's look at the most vulnerable around us, like widows and orphans. Visit widows. It doesn't have the idea that you have to go out and find a widow or an orphan. I do believe it has that idea that as it comes, this is something that you can encounter. You know, Jordan and I, for example, have decided not to adopt. I don't feel ashamed about that. But we were talking the other day, but what if one of you came to us or someone said, listen, we're asking you specifically, though, because we trust in you, will you take this child? What do you think Jordan and I should do? I guess we'll have Briggs 7. God bless you because some of you here went looking. God bless you for that. That's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. That is pure and undefiled religion. There's no law against that. So we've got to open up our hearts. We've got to open up our minds. We've got to open up our wallets. There's this group in Arizona. I'm not supportive of how they're going about it in the sense that they do take it that it's their church's collective responsibility to adopt all these kids. They're actually not doing that in reality. It's just individuals, but they're going to some of these facilities where abortions are taking place, and they're tactfully pleading with people. And if I remember correctly, I believe out of everyone that's grown from that movement, they have adopted hundreds of children. So are these people, I've heard of them, oh yeah, well, what are you going to do? Take my child? They said, yes, we've taken hundreds of them. If we had one of our own that found themselves with child, what would we do here at North Cullen? Y'all worried about losing money in the bank account? Would we help? So, hope this has been an encouragement to you. Hope that if you encounter this, you do so balanced and tactfully with love. Speak the truth in love, I guess is what I would sum it up with. And if we have opportunity, we see it, then let's be about it, yeah? Let's put our money where our mouth is, as we say, and have hearts like the Lord. Like God, who's kind of interesting because he adopted all of us, but kind of flipped the table on us. He actually took his only son. Now this is interesting. God took his only son and he gave him to us to be crucified for us, to redeem us, so that we may be adopted. Praise God. If you need to respond to the